The new year marks the halfway point for freshman members of Congress, who all serve 2-year terms, of course. Joining me to talk about her first year in the nation's Capitol building is Representative Abigail Spanberger, a Democrat representing Virginia's 7th District. Congresswoman, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Bill. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's a pleasure. So, with impeachment looming, how much work is going to get done going forward? I know it's in the hands of the Senate, and whether the Senate actually removes President Trump or not, how does work get done?
So this whole, since the beginning of the impeachment inquiry, we have been hard at work on legislative efforts within the House of Representatives and have had a number of successes, strong bipartisan successes in this fall into winter.
Because there are other committees, not just the 3 or 4 committees that were working on impeachment. Other committees are hard at work.
Exactly. I serve on the Agriculture Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee, and we meet regularly focused on the work of the day. At this point, the House having already cast its vote essentially for an indictment, which is what impeachment is at this juncture, we will pass it off to the Senate, and the House goes back to kind of a full focus on legislative priorities across all committees.
And what's some of the work that you're most proud of in this past year? I know there was a border security bill that President Trump signed into law.
Yes.
That you worked with Representative Will Hurd, I believe, from Texas.
That's right.
And I mean, that seems like a bipartisan effort. And I feel like bipartisan is not a word that we get to say very often.
We don't hear it enough, but I have been wholly focused on bipartisanship because I believe it's the way you make sustainable policy. And I was proud to join with Congressman Hurd. He's also a former CIA officer. He's a Republican from Texas. He represents the longest stretch of the U.S.-Mexico border. And given our backgrounds, we had said we are constantly talking about the challenges at the border, but how do we get at the root causes of some of the migration crisis that we're seeing? And so we created a piece of legislation directing U.S. intelligence agencies to focus on narco trafficking and human smuggling networks and to determine and make an assessment of how much is that impacting our immigration challenges facing at the border. It is one piece of the larger puzzle when we're dealing with the challenges of immigration, but it is one that we think is vitally important, getting at kind of the root of one of the problems. And that piece of legislation was just signed into law, so I'm very proud of that.
And that obviously is separate from a wall or other elements that might be part of this package that you're talking about.
So the aspect that we were looking at is how do we get to some of the root causes of immigration? Right. From Northern Triangle countries, why do we see people fleeing, right? So when we're seeing large groups of people arriving at the southern border, what got them there? And how can we address those challenges so they're not leaving in the first place? We don't have people...
Crime in their home cities or countries or whatever it might be.
And the narco trafficking and the human smugglers that are benefiting from pushing people to the southern border. Then when we're looking at the larger challenges of immigration and the work requirements here, we had a bipartisan bill called the Agricultural Workforce Modernization Act. Totally bipartisan bill. That just passed the House of Representatives. I'm hoping it gets a vote in the Senate. And I worked on that bill because we're looking at the challenges facing our workforce and agricultural communities. And I represent the 7th District, a long, skinny district through Central Virginia, many agricultural communities, and ensuring that they have the workforce here legally who can do the work in agriculture on dairies and in our greenhouses is vitally important to our Central Virginia economy.
What about another issue that we were talking about earlier, drug prices? Yeah. First of all, why is it still possible that Medicare doesn't uniformly get the chance to negotiate them? Yeah. And this phrase, pharmacy benefit managers, why is transparency and what those folks do so important?
So transparency in pharmacy benefit managers is important because when we're looking at the continued increase in prescription drug costs, people will always point to the middleman. Well, there's a pharmacy benefit manager, that's where the price goes up. And the true reality is there is no transparency in drug pricing.
And there are only like 3 managers anyway who are controlling this whole thing, the cartel.
Exactly. And so it's basically a middleman organization. You don't know what sort of rebates and vouchers are given. And so I had a bill that passed 403-0. Nobody voted against it. Totally bipartisan. That said the rebates should be made public so people understand the pricing and the pricing schemes that do or do not occur and how those may or may not contribute to the rising cost of prescription drugs. And then in the House, we just voted in December to give Medicare the power to negotiate its prescription drug pricing. It's something that the veterans, the VA have. They can negotiate prescription drugs, and Medicare Part D cannot. So hopefully that will move forward and get a vote in the Senate as well.
Well, we are out of time. I hate to say that because we just scratched the surface, but Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger from the 7th, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's send it